What's up, cooks? Welcome to the Card Kitchen. I'm the Card Chef, and today we are looking at all the cards that have currently been released that I believe are going to be the best cards from the set and can potentially change the meta going forward. We're going to look at 6 cards, but basically 5 situations in which I think these cards can be very good and potentially change the game. So the first one we're going to look at is Solego or Solgaleo or Solgalia, or I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a ton of comments, but you keep pronouncing it wrong. Solgaleo EX. This guy here, 180 HP, 120 damage for 2 energy, 2 metal energy, and attacks itself for 20 damage. Or 10 damage, I should say, but also has the ability Rise and Road. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may switch it with your active Pokemon. I think this is going to change the game quite a bit because this can be played in a lot of decks for a lot of different reasons. One, obviously, as the attacker, so you're going to want to play Metal Energies, but also, like, it could honestly be played in decks, even though it's a stage 2, so it might be a little awkward. But it could create some interesting combos where you need to get something out of the active and something else in. So just for instance, like in one of my previous videos talking about these new cards, I talked about Regirock. Regirock is probably one of the most underrated, undervalued tanks in the game, even though I do find it's one of the best, but it's never played. And the reason why it's never played is because it's huge retreat cost. I think it's a 3 or 4 retreat cost on the Regirock. And what we can do is we can actually just look at it now. And we'll just go here. We'll go Regirock because there's a bunch of cards I want to talk about here. But Regirock here, if you look, okay, it says, so it has 120 HP and a 3 retreat cost. The attack is not needed because it says it takes 20 less damage from attacks. So it's going to take 20 less damage from attacks, and it has 120 HP. You throw a cape or a rocky helmet on this guy, he's going to stay on the field for a super long time, at least long enough for you to get into your Solgaleo EX in order to bring it out for free. Because now you don't have to waste a leaf, you don't have to use XPs, you don't have to use energies to try and retreat this guy out of the front to get your Pokemon you want out into the active spot. Not only that, but things like Druddigon or anything with a decent HP that can either do early game damage and a Rocky Helmet is going to be super good, especially if it has a high retreat cost. So again, your Druddigon has 2 retreat costs. You don't have to waste the leaf that you have in your deck because you're still going to want to play it with this card. But what you do is you bring this guy out, and then if you ever have to retreat him, then that's when you use your leaf. So you can get a ton of passive damage with your Druddigon for free and then retreat it for free as well. That is going to be super duper valuable for this card. Now, I'm sure there's a bunch of other great partners, but another one is Kangaskhan, because Kangaskhan has 100 HP. That's already pretty decent for a stage 1. Could do 30 to 60 damage for just 1 energy, and considering this guy only takes 2, you have the ability to put an energy early on your Kangaskhan and not worry about this guy not getting loaded up. And then that also has a 3 retreat cost, right? So now you don't have to waste a leaf on that either. You can just retreat it for free by bringing him out with the active or with its ability. So there's going to be a lot of interesting cards that this card pairs with, but it's also going to pair with, and I've said this a bunch of times already, but I'm going to say it again, it could potentially pair very well with Victory Bell, because you can create this amazing loop where you're just gusting basic Pokemon for free with your Victory Bell and its ability, and then you get a free retreat with it to bring this guy out to attack, and then the next turn you use your leaf to get him out, bring the Victory Bell in, gust another card out, and then use his ability again to go into the active spot. So now you're doing a retreat with leaf on your Victory Bell, and then retreating again in a sense with your Solgaleo's ability to bring it into the active. So there's a ton of cool combos and loops you can create with Victory Bell by doing that. And of course, this card is going to be very popular because of Rare Candy. I just did an entire video on Rare Candy, specifically in all the cards, the new ones and the old cards already in the game, which ones will best pair with it and which ones won't pair with it very well. So go check that out. But Rare Candy absolutely will change the game. I'm still on the fence a little bit whether or not this just brings stage 2 decks into the top tier meta, think about Giratina Darkrai right now and how it's considered like A+++ or S tier and nothing else is there. Everything is just under it by a long shot. Does it get it up to there? I'm not so sure because, again, and you can go watch my other video where I get way in depth about it, but we also have to remember we still only have 20 cards in a deck. You have to be able to remove cards in current stage 2 decks to fit this stuff in. You can't just simply remove the stage 1 cards out of the deck because it's also going to decrease its consistency while trying to increase it with Rare Candy. So it's kind of like a give and take there. So you kind of have to figure out how to build it correctly. And I think it might take some time, at least 1 or 2 weeks, to really figure out how Rare Candy best fits in stage 2 decks. But I do think it absolutely will change the meta going forward, and not just with this guy, but a bunch of stage 2s in the game. And then another card that we're going to talk about is Lana. I think this could potentially, depending on how good or bad Araquanid, I don't know why I can't pronounce any of these cards. Araquanid is. So it says you can use this card only if Araquanid is in play. Switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active spot. So it's basically Sabrina and Cyrus, but you get to choose the Pokemon and it doesn't have to have any damage on it at all. As long as you have Araquanid on the field, you can use this card to bring out whatever you want, like the Victory Bell, except Victory Bell is only basic Pokemon. So this is actually, you get to choose whatever Pokemon, no matter what, as long as you have Araquanid on the field. So Araquanid, depending on how good or bad it is, might just be played in every deck with Lana, so you can get Lana as a staple. So like Lana might legit just become a staple in every deck alongside Araquanid in order to just make sure you can control the game and win games whenever you damn well please by gusting out whichever Pokemon you want. Now, if Araquanid is really bad, then it might not see play at all. But I do think this could potentially warp the meta and completely change it into just using Lanas over using a Sabrina or Cyrus or a Sabrina Cyrus split like we often see now. So I really think this could be very strong. And Araquanid is a water type Pokemon, but I don't think you will necessarily have to play this in water decks. Even if Araquanid is only water energy, you might not even use it to attack at all. So this might be extremely strong, like stronger than I think people might assume. So I do think this will change the meta. Another card that could potentially change things up is Alolan Raichu EX, because this card has the move Psychic, which of course Alakazam has, Jinx has, and Executor EX, or Executor from Mythical Island, the baby Executor, has as well. They all have the move Psychic, which does a certain amount of base damage, then a certain amount of more damage per energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Gallade also has this exact same attack, except it's not called Psychic, which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. This attack does 30 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So 60 base plus 30 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. That's the exact same amount of attack that Alakazam does, except Alakazam is a stage 2. So in this case, not only is it an EX Pokemon, so it has more HP, has the same energy requirement, and does the same amount of attack, but all of its energy requirement is colorless, which means this card can be splashed into any single deck that you want. It can be played with fire energy, electric energy, water energy, dark energy with Darkrai. It can be played in a psychic deck with with Alakazam and Jinx. It can be played with Giratina. It can be played with whatever you want. And there's also a ton of ways to ramp energy on this as well, considering it is colorless requirement. You could ramp onto it with a Pachirisu because it's electric. You can ramp onto it with Manaphy because Manaphy can ramp onto whatever it wants and it takes colorless energy. Same thing with Dialga. So there's so many ways that you can ramp onto this, and it feels very similar to a couple of cards. One we're going to talk about next, but the other card is Yanmega, which we already have in the game, and I can pull that up for you as well. Yanmega, very similar, 3 colorless energy, does 120 damage, but discards an energy from itself. So this card, like Yanmega, could be splashed into anything it wants. Yanmega never got to see a whole bunch of play, but it only ever did 120 damage, whereas your Alolan Raichu in a format like the current format we're in, where there's a lot of energy, 3 on Darkrai, 4 on Giratina, 4 minimum on Charizard, Mewtwo, all those types of cards. Gyarados takes 4, Blastoise takes 5, Magnezone takes 3. Add it all up, this card does 30 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon, which is, if it's a minimum of 3, that's 90 plus 60, that's 150 damage. That's a lot more damage. So this card could actually be played in a bunch of decks. This can be played in a Gyarados deck with Manaphy, and you can fill up both Gyarados and Raichu to have 2 attackers that will absolutely destroy anything that they get into. So this is going to possibly change the game a lot more than anyone would have thought, compared to Yanmega, who didn't really change the game all that much, but could be extremely strong. Another card is potentially, and this is probably the lowest of them all, but Alolan Marowak. So Alolan Marowak can easily be splashed into any single deck, just like the Raichu and just like the Yanmega. No, it doesn't take just colorless energy. It takes 2 fire and 1 colorless. However, with Kiawe, which reads choose one of your Alolan Marowak or Turtonator, take 2 fire energy from your energy zone and attach it to that Pokemon. Your turn ends. So yes, it will end your turn, but what else ends your turn that's super duper strong? It's Giratina. And Giratina is super strong because it can ramp itself. Now, Alolan Marowak can't ramp itself, but when you can ramp it with the Kiawe, then you have a chance to just play Kiawe and Marowak in any deck you want. You can play it again in a water deck, an electric deck, a dark deck with Darkrai to get that additional damage. You can play this in whatever deck you want, and then just tech in those Kiawes so that you're ready to go. So think of it like this, right? This is why I have this here, by the way, so we can look at all these different Pokemon. I did want to compare a couple of cards to Yanmega, like Alolan Marowak and Alolan Raichu, but think of Magnezone, right? Magnezone and Giratina. These cards also splashed into any single deck because they could ramp to themselves. So just think of Magnezone and Alolan Marowak. Alolan Marowak and Magnezone in the same deck. Even with another card that takes a different energy requirement, you can ramp onto Magnezone to itself because of Magneton. You can manually build something else up, and then you can also use Kiawe onto your Marowak. Now you could even play it with Giratina EX, but this would be a little harder to do because both cards end the turn. You can never play them in the same turn. However, if you played, let's say, Kiawe on your turn 1 or your first turn that Alolan Marowak was out, and then you can focus the rest of the time on ending your turn with Giratina, then you could potentially ramp 2 Pokemon at the same time while manually loading up something else up. So this card could potentially, again, be splashed into any deck. Now, will it? I'm not so sure, because its attack, the Burn-In Boomerang, does 70 damage for each heads. And so what you do is you flip 2 coins, and for each heads, it does 70 damage. If one of them is heads, then you automatically burn your opponent's Pokemon, which means for 1 flip of a heads, you do 70 plus 20 for the burn, which is 90 damage, and then it could potentially build if they never flip heads to get out of being burned. And if you flip 2, you actually do 160 damage for basically 1 energy, because again, you've ramped with your Kiawe and then only put one manual energy on Marowak. So this card could be splashed into a bunch of decks. So this card, along with Alolan Raichu, in fact, these two cards can be played in the same deck together with a whole bunch of different stuff. So I'm very interested to try, like a lot of my cooks that I've made that I love the most, and I think a lot of people love the most, they tend to get the most views, are cooks where like I've put a bunch of different Pokemon that shouldn't be played together but do seem to work together in some sense. One of my best viewed videos currently, or recently I should say, is a Leafeon, Magnezone, and Giratina deck where I play Psychic Energies because it allowed me to ramp with Magneton, ramp with Giratina, and ramp with Leafeon all in the same turn if I wanted to, and build 3 Pokemon at the same time. So it was very cool. And then you also see decks nowadays with Giratina, Magnezone, and Darkrai, again, build in 3 Pokemon at the same time. Those decks aren't as great as just the Darkrai Giratina, but you may never know. Cards like this may allow you to do something very interesting and create very cool cooks, even if they're not meta. So this could potentially change the game. I'm not so sure compared to the other ones. I definitely think Alolan Raichu will actually change the game quite a bit because it's just so strong, like 150 damage. And yes, it's only 140 HP, but with a cape, at least it has 160. Darkrai, we know, does very good damage with passive damage, and it's 80 damage once it finally attacks, and that only has 140. But Alolan Raichu at least can do 150 pretty much base because, like I said, most of the Pokemon that we're up against have at least 3 energy on them. Now, this won't do too great against Meowscarada, I don't think, because it would do 60 and 60 because it requires 2 energy to attack with Meowscarada. So therefore, it would do 120, and there's no real way to get that additional 20 damage unless it's a Rocky Helmet because you can't use red against it. But what you can do is, because we have again things like Rare Candy that will also change the game, you can also just start putting Greninja in basically any deck you want. Like, imagine you can put like Greninja and Crobat in the same deck, right? So Greninja and Crobat, they both do snipe damage. If you have that in your Arceus deck, you're going to be able to output so much damage that it's like kind of insane. Now, of course, that will be a humongous combo deck. You would need to have the Arceus down. You would also have to have 3 Pokemon on your bench to do full damage. You would have to have a Crobat and a Greninja ready to be evolved and your rare candies in your hand. So a lot of combo pieces, very much required, but very much potentially strong. I'm very interested, I think the most, from the old cards with Greninja to see how it continues to go in the future. It's already a very good card, and Rare Candy might actually make it extremely strong because there might be decks that are just like, you know what, let's forget, like most Greninja decks don't play red because Greninja's already like in every turn red. So now if we can get it by like turn 2, it might absolutely be very strong. Like, I think Greninja and Meowscarada might actually be very strong going forward because it's just a lot. It's going to be able to do 150 like every single turn instead of 150 one turn with a red and then 130 and 130 and 130. Like 150 every turn because you're able to get into both. Not only that, but you can honestly play your 2 Froakie and your 2 Greninja and 2 Rare Candy, and then 2 full Meowscarada lines because Sprigatito finds itself, right? Or you can just remove the Floragato as well because it would automatically search a Meowscarada. So there's so many ways you can do this, right? Same thing with, so I think another grass type, I think Caterpie for Butterfree, which is not the greatest card, but Butterfree Caterpie has the same move as Sprigatito, which would search a grass type Pokemon. So that is another thing. Butterfree and Meowscarada would like automatically search the card that they're trying to evolve into very fast. So I think Meowscarada will actually be kind of like insanely broken in the sense, not broken, but in the sense that you can play 1 Sprigatito and 2 Meowscarada in your deck, and that's it. And if you get your Rare Candy in your hand, The turn you search for your Meowscarada with Sprigatito, you automatically get it because the only other 2 grass type Pokemon in your deck are Meowscarada. So it's like you're going to automatically get it by turn 2 or by your second turn of attack, which is great because then you also have 2 energy on it. So there's actually a lot of interesting things. Like you can have a 17 trainer Meowscarada deck and it might actually work. Now the hard thing about that would have to try and get your rare candy in your hand. But you can also play things like Iono and stuff like that to try and get into that quicker instead of trying to get into like a Pokemon quicker, because Iono has been kind of traditionally trying to find your stage 2s, which will probably still be played alongside Rare Candy as well. So these are the 3 cards. I think Lana and Araquanid will be very cool and interesting, and I do think it could be Meta Warpin. I'm just not so sure, because again, we have to see what Araquanid does, but honestly, even if it's like terrible and it does nothing and you can't attack with it because you're playing it in a deck that doesn't play water energy and Araquanid takes all water energy, let's say, I still don't think it would matter all that much, because it's just like you just put it on the bench, you let it sit there, who cares, and then you just build another Pokemon and then you just destroy them by gusting out whatever Pokemon you want. Like this is like the strongest Gust card we have, and if you can get it online with Araquanid, it's going to control every game you play, especially if your opponent's not playing it. So I think these are the best cards that we have from the set is Rare Candy, Lana, Solgaleo, Alolan Raichu, Alolan Marowak potentially with Kiawe, but we'll see how this goes. And let me know what you think the best card is so far that we've seen. Of course, the whole set hasn't been revealed, but let me know what you think anyways and how you think these cards can fit. Like I said, I don't think Marowak will be meta breaking, but I think it could change the meta in the same kind of way that Giratina and Magnezone have in a way. It obviously takes a lot more to do the free ramping thing than Giratina and Magnezone, but you never know, it might just fit in certain decks really well. As well as just being able to play it in fire decks, even if it's the only fire Pokemon you can ramp onto, you never know. But anyways, again, let me know what you thought about these cards that I'm talking about. And so what are your favorite cards from this set, and what cards do you think will be the best so far? Stay tuned for more updates, as well as I'm sure we're going to get more reveals. But anyways, with that being said, leave a comment in the comment section below, like, subscribe, and share, join my Discord and my Twitter, and as always, keep cooking.